Welcome to the 6th video in the series of building a quarter scale T-Rex. Here you'll see a collection of airbrushes I've collected over the years. Everything from a $50 airbrush to a $650 airbrush. The airbrush I'll be using on the T-Rex is a simple, inexpensive and cheap Amazon $50 airbrush because you don't require very high detail on this particular model, it's so large. I mixed up paints very small amounts at a time, you don't need a lot. And this acrylic paint from again from Amazon.com is excellent paint. It sticks to the primer very, very well indeed. It covers very well. I use a simple sheet of copy paper just to try out the airbrush, make sure it's working properly, have a few tests, lines, dots and things like that. As you can see, that's the airbrush I'm using for this whole T-Rex project, and it's extremely cheap, about $50 from Amazon.com. Here you can see I'm putting the markings on the back of the T-Rex. I'm doing it in little spots, little dots, very, very slowly. I actually didn't like this method in the end, and I went over it with a more solid covering or more solid coating of paint. But just trying out different ideas to get the different textures gives you depth of colour. On the opposite side of the T-Rex, I marked it with tape, so I got the stripes or the lines coinciding with the lines on the other side. I used a different method here. It was just sprayed on from a distance in one straight line or one curved line rather than dots, and I liked that effect much better. It produced a more realistic effect. Here I'm just darkening the scales around the feet just to give it a little bit of more of a three-dimensional look. Later I painted by hand with a brush the claws, a dark brown, very dark chocolate brown. Now here you'll see I'm applying a white paint mixed with a little yellow on the teeth first of all. This is just the first coat before I go over it with a brownish yellow to give the teeth a more unclean look, if you like. Here I'm spraying over the white teeth with a yellowish brown mixture just to dull them down and make them look more realistic. Just using a small paintbrush, I'm applying a few dots by hand, a few scales in different colours. You don't have to use an airbrush all the time. A little or a fine pointed brush does a very good job. I applied a reddish pink to the membrane between the jaws just by brush, and then after that I went over it with an airbrush with some light pink, and then over the top of that again with the main body colour, which was a nutmeg brown mixed with black. And that was airbrushed over the top. and I think that gives a more realistic finish. It builds up layers and it looks convincing that way. This is where I go over the membrane area with a light pinkish colour, and then after this I go over with 2 or 3 coats of the body colour. Not to obscure it, but to dull it down a little bit. It's much too pink, much too red. The tongue was painted with 2 shades of pink. First of all I put down a very light pink and then sponged on a dark pink and then covered it with a clear gloss. I really hope you've enjoyed this series of videos on the T-Rex. Please subscribe if you like what you've seen. We have a number of other projects coming up, including the 3 raptors that go with this T-Rex and many other projects. Take care.